Now, another wave of protests and occupations against higher tuition fees in university cuts in the last 24 hours, and yet more scenes of violence. Nick Dixon spent the day with protesters in central London.
It started as a peaceful protest, but soon spilled over into violence and vandalism. Students painted graffiti on government buildings and tried to climb through windows. Then, as they were hemmed in by police, protesters took their frustrations out on officers, throwing barriers at them and then targeting a stranded police van. They tried to topple it over into the middle of Whitehall, and when that failed, the looting began.
It's a police handbook!
By early evening, the fire had gone out of much of the protest. Students even took to finishing off homework as they waited for the demonstration to pick up again. But police kept the protest within the confines of Whitehall by containment, or kettling, as some called it, refusing to allow anyone to move from the area.
A lot of the students are really starting to get frustrated now. They're pleading with the police to let them leave. Many of them have been waiting here behind the line 3-4 hours.
Why are we standing here freezing cold? And you're not letting us go. We haven't done anything.
When students were finally allowed to start leaving the contained area after nearly 10 hours of protests, many were in tears.
Mark Bergfeld is here. He's with the Education Activist Network. You're responsible for organising these protests. I know you weren't out there protesting yourself, but you were across all that was happening. Do you think it was successful?
I think it was very successful. I believe first and foremost it was successful because of the sheer size of the protest. After the last protest, when we had 52,000 students and lecturers demonstrating in the streets of London, we've had more than 130,000 people across the country demonstrating, showing their anger, and now we have more than 20 universities occupying their lecture halls.
Lots of scenes of rioting may be too strong, but certainly vandalism. Scenes that people don't like.
I condemn the violence by the police on the day, and I can understand...
It wasn't just the police, though, was it? We saw very specific cases of people vandalising property and damaging property.
I can understand why a 16, a 15-year-old or a 17-year-old who has had his EMA scrapped climbs onto a police car and vents his anger, because in reality what the Tories, what the Liberal Democrats are doing to the future of millions of kids is wrecking those futures.
But can you see how to a lot of people that's just not acceptable? Seeing that, there are other ways to get your point across.
How has history been changed so far? The suffragettes handcuffed themselves to Parliament. Today we celebrate the fact that women have the right to vote. The proposals, Lord Brown's proposals of increasing tuition fees by 300%, by scrapping EMA, by scrapping the annual teaching budget, will decimate higher education and turn our universities into bastions for the few and the privileged, and for the rest of us, it will be learning factories rather than critical learning and critical teaching.
There's a section of the population, rightly or wrongly, we may argue wrongly, that already view students as having a rather nice life, actually. Most of the country is facing terrible cuts. People are worried about paying their basic bills, and they think these people are having a life that I'd rather like to do, go and study and learn, and they're protesting, they're being violent when we're scared about the basics.
Our movement, the students' movement, stands in the strong position and stands by the principle of an injury to one is an injury to all. We have raised the national demand of no cuts in public sector. That means we align ourselves with all those people currently under attack by the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives. That means the firefighters, that means the pensioners, that means the unemployed, that means the single mothers, that means every single person under attack. We align ourselves with those people and we say our fight is your fight, and we have shown as students that we're fighting for each and every one in this country who is currently under attack.
Can I just quickly get your thoughts on this? What would you have had the police do yesterday dealing with protesters? Would you have had them just let them have free rein and run the risk of more violence, more damage, and maybe even worse?
I'm not the police, first
but
and
you were
foremost.
criticising what they were doing yesterday.
But I criticise it. So what I say is the police started to voice their opinions very early on after the last protest that it would ramp up action against student protesters. And I believe they provoked a confrontation. They started to bring riot police into the very beginning at the Carnival of Resistance. Okay. They had riot police present already.
One very, very quick question. We have David Willits, University Minister, on the show. What would you say to him? What would you ask him to do differently? Bearing in mind, we have to find money from somewhere.
How can he sleep at night? That's the first and foremost question. And second of all, how can his government let 95 billion be avoided and evaded in tax every year and taking money away from the poorest? How can he let Vodafone off the bill, who has evaded 6.5 billion in tax? And how can he attack the most poorest and most vulnerable in our society rather than the rich people at the top? How can his government pour out 7 billion in bankers' bonuses rather than taking away people's EMA?
Okay, well, I've written those questions down and we will put them to him. Thank you very much for giving us your views this morning. Thank you.